I do agree with you in the fact that us citizens need to examine because, the government wants us people to be divided.
There, you see? Common ground already. Out of curiosity, divided for the benefit of whom?
Whenever there's a president who actually cares about the people, they die a certain mysterious death.
A president who cares about which people? Go on.
Well, not so mysterious since they were obviously shot, by people who just hated them basically.
Now, these presidents who have been shot, are we only counting the ones who were killed, or did any president who got shot catch a cap because they cared about the people?
And it was our government, Our government wants us to be divided. Our government doesn't care about the people. They just care about money, power, and just their own benefits, basically.
Again, absolutely spot on here. 100%. We agree.
So yeah, I completely agree with you when you say that both sides are being represented by the bad people, but that wasn't my point. My point is that the Republicans have been doing a lot better for the people nowadays than the Democrats.
Now, see, this is part of why I tried to frame our earlier discussion as progressives versus conservatives, because the modern Republican Party and the Republican Party of 100 years ago are not at all the same party. They don't represent the same interests and values, nor do the Democrats.
The way I've seen it, the way I've studied it, the way I observed it, most of the people have been among the Democratic Party. Because like I said in my previous TikTok, who were the ones that created the KKK?
Conservative Southern Democrats. Though I think you'll find that now the KKK largely throws its support behind conservative Republicans. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a conservative versus progressive one.
Who were the ones that owned slaves?
Back then, the political parties as we understand them didn't exist. You had like the Constitutional Union Party, the Southern Democrats, the Northern Democrats, and then the Republicans came along as a sort of abolitionist party. Progressives.
Who were the ones that lynched blacks? Who were the ones that opposed the Civil Rights Act?
Conservatives. The religious right.
Who killed MLK?
Well, we know that James Earl Ray was heavy into George Wallace and his segregationist platform. And Wallace was absolutely a Democrat until founding the American Independent Party in 1968. Notably after losing in the primary to Democratic candidate Lyndon Johnson, who signed the Civil Rights Act, because Johnson, progressive, Wallace, conservative. Like, you see why these terms you're using aren't helpful, yeah?
Killed JFK.
I think there's a pretty interesting case to be made that it might have been George Herbert Walker Bush. That's in the realm of conspiracy theory. Though if we accept the, CIA involvement, then it was definitely conservative elements within the CIA that opposed Kennedy, a Democrat.
Who killed RFK?
And then Sirhan. Although Kennedy's son believes that Sirhan did not, in fact, kill his father, and there was a second gunman involved. Who knows?
All Democrats.
It's interesting that every point you've made here is pre-1968, the Civil Rights Act and the Southern Strategy.
And who are the ones that are trying to change their past, or better yet, trying to hide the past and try to act like the good guys and the ones that are fighting for the people?
Hey, man, Southern conservatives, largely. I've lived here 30 years, and I know a lot of people flying the wrong flag, claiming it's about heritage and not hate. And yet we're a Republican stronghold. How do you reconcile those things? If the Democrat Party founded the KKK, and if the Democrat Party is the party of racists, why do all racists now support the Republican Party? Because it's about conservatives versus progressives.
While at the same time, bringing them into the slaughterhouse like sheep who don't even know what their freaking demise is going to be.
Well, now you're just talking about capitalism, man, and both parties are all in on that.
It's all the Democrats.
Sure, as long as we limit our discussion to specifically things that happened before the Southern Strategy or the party switch. Like James Garfield, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, they don't get a mention in because you're not going to bring up Ronald Reagan. Doesn't fit the narrative.
Now they're trying to brainwash and distract us with all this liberal ideology.
Would that be the ideology of liberal democracy upon which this country is supposedly founded, or some other liberal ideology?
Trying to make men and women believe that they can be something that they're not.
Well, I thought here in the land of the free and the home of the brave, you could grow up to be anything you wanted to be.
Trying to do something on kids.
Are you talking about the church right now?
That should just not be available to them in general.
I keep hearing this point, mostly from Jordan Peterson crying on the internet or posting on Twitter. Trans people don't have anything to do with this. Children aren't having surgeries without consultation with their parents and doctors, medical professionals. It's not a thing that's happening. It is a culture war talking point employed by conservative grifters after your money because the Republican and Democratic parties don't, on a policy level, fundamentally disagree about anything.
Child mutilation, if you didn't get the hint.
Yeah, man, I get it. I'm circumcised.
And now they're trying to make us believe that it's okay to unalive babies.
Nobody's really trying to do that. That's a separate discussion. You call it unaliving babies. I call it a woman's bodily autonomy. We're going to get off in the weeds on this one because it requires a religious argument about what the moment of conception means for the soul.
That we should eat insects now.
Insects. My dad used to eat crickets when we go fishing to gross me out. But like the negative effect that worldwide meat consumption is having on the environment and the health of the people, it needs to be addressed, and acceptable meat substitutes need to be found. We got to feed people. Protein's protein.
And that men are able to get pregnant, and that women have, that thing that men have, if you know.
I'm not going to really argue with you on these points upon which we fundamentally disagree, because it's clear to me from your tone that you're not comfortable discussing any of this. So I'm just left to wonder why you brought it up. Nobody's going to take you seriously in a discussion on sexual, reproductive health, or trans issues if you're afraid to say words like penis and vagina out loud. Of course, given your conservative values, it might not be okay with your parents if you did. In which case, I understand, but we still shouldn't be having this conversation.
In general, most of the problems in this country have been caused by Democrats.
Most of the problems in this country have been caused by the slow erosion of labor rights, the disparity between real wages and cost of living, inability to access health care, either mental or physical, and the policies of neoliberal capitalism. Policies, and I can't stress this enough, on which Republicans and Democrats both agree. They're the ones steering this thing, and that's the direction they're steering it in, regardless of what any of us want. Trans people aren't the reason that 63% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency.
But then again, Republicans do take some fault for just sitting back and just doing nothing about it and just letting the Democrats do all the destructions.
Wild, considering that there have been 19 Republican presidents, more than any other party. People incapable of doing anything about the failures of government. They sure seem to be holding the wheel a lot. Because again, conservatives, progressives.
So Republicans do take some fault in this. They're fraidy cats. They're too afraid to stop the bad guy from doing more harm.
Going back to the beginning of this video where we agreed and you said that there were bad people running each party, I'd like to now point out that all these minutes in and you've done nothing but lay blame at the foot of Democrats while excusing the Republicans. At worst, they're weak. But they certainly bear no responsibility for, say, the crack epidemic or Iran-Contra, endless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, backing authoritarian dictatorships across the globe. Do you see the cognitive dissonance here, man?
Which leads into my next point as to why I think Trump was one of the best presidents that America has had in the past few decades.
There is no metric that supports this statement. The best thing about Trump is that in a system designed for evil, as I believe ours is, he was incompetent at committing it.
Trump was actually fighting for the people.
People named Trump, yeah.
Who signed the First Step Act, which released hundreds of thousands of incarcerated people and released them back into society, which 80% happened to be black.
It was a bipartisan bill, but yeah, Trump signed it because that's what presidents do. They sign the laws that other people make. He had nothing to do with its creation. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a huge disparity between 3,000 and hundreds of thousands, right? A couple thousand more got their sentences reduced, but definitely not hundreds of thousands.
Who proposed a bill that would send $100 billion to low-income communities?
Now, I'm just going to assume that you're talking about the Opportunity Zone investments here because, proposed bill, you didn't really cite anything. Now, that program that number, that $100 billion, comes from Steve Mnuchin and the Treasury Department, and that's over the lifetime of the program. And in actuality, it has done less than about $5 billion from the real figures I've been able to find. Ultimately, however, the plan is little more than a multi-billion-dollar tax break, allowing those with means to snatch up properties in urban areas on the cheap. As it really just amounts to a delay on capital gains tax as long as the money that you withdraw you're pumping into an urban area. How many poor folks do you know have ever paid a capital gains tax? I mean, hell, how many rich ones have ever paid one either?
But too bad that the government did not go forth with it because they were too busy trying to impeach him.
Maybe he shouldn't have committed impeachable offenses. If it weren't for Republicans' complete refusal to even entertain the idea, he would have been removed from office. In a more sensible time, say the Nixon 60s, he would have been. He would have been. But, you know, the party of good Christian values doesn't believe that fraud is an impeachable offense, nor is blackmail. However, don't get a blowy in the office, because then the dignity of the office, right? Come on, man.
Who brought those thousands of manufacturing jobs which Obama said were never coming back? But when Trump actually brought them back, Obama was trying to take credit for it, saying that it was his Obamacare that did it.
Trump claimed he brought 700,000 jobs back. The actual number was about 450,000, which tracks just about equally with the 916,000 manufacturing jobs added under Obama's 2 terms. Obamacare's a shit policy, though, even when it's called Romney Care.
Who started the construction of the wall?
George W. Bush.
Which stopped hundreds of millions of illegal immigrants from trespassing into this country?
Do you just like hundreds of millions as a figure? Because the actual number is significantly higher than that, in the millions. Borders are bullshit anyway. I don't support them. Next.
Not only did it cease that,
No, it didn't.
it also ceased all the human trafficking that goes through the southern border.
Atlanta's not on the southern border. And that airport is a hub for such activity.
Because not so fun fact, most of the human trafficking in this country happens along the southern border.
The top cities in the USA for human trafficking per capita are Washington, D.C., Las Vegas, Orlando, and Atlanta. Human trafficking is a real problem, but to suggest that Trump's border wall has done anything to mitigate that is silly. This is a billion-dollar industry. 400, 500 miles of border wall is not going to put a dent in it.
And another not so fun fact, 40% of women and children who cross the southern border are either human trafficked or even worse, R-worded.
And that's absolutely a real problem, but it's not one more border wall will fix. You seem to be approaching human trafficking as if it is a uniquely United States and Mexico border situation. And while there is absolutely some overlap, the same could be said of literally every border in the world.
There's many other policies that Trump did which I can praise him for, which I can also go on and on about.
Nah, that's fine. You don't need to.
But my point is that Trump is the perfect example of what a president should be.
You're serious. The amount of criminality and character flaw you have to purposefully overlook to make a statement like that is sort of strange. He was on those flight logs. We know he underpays his contractors. We know he was taken to court for race-related discrimination when it came to renting out apartments he owned. We have a quite credible account from his now deceased wife about the time he R-worded her over a bad hair transplant. And none of this is secret. None of this is hard to find. The only thing I can think is that you've willfully decided that everything negative said about him is a falsehood, and that every falsehood he speaks is somehow true.
One who fights for the people and not for his own benefits.
$1.6 billion in reported revenue during the tenure of his presidency, a tenure during which he did not divest himself of controlling interest in his companies, as had every president before him, up to and including peanut farmer Jimmy Carter.
He's the perfect example of what the Republican Party should be and what a good representation of their political party is.
Well, see, we may end this whole discussion agreeing again, because I do believe Trump is a fantastic representation of what the modern day Republican Party believes, despite the fact that literally no Republican backed him as a potential candidate until it was made clear that he was going to win, at which point the entire party swung into lockstep, at which point the entirety of the GOP swung into lockstep behind him. He's a rich man who's never done an honest day's work and exploited loopholes in the taxation and legal system to enrich himself at the cost of everyone around him. Kind of made him perfect to be a politician, really. Plus, he was on TV, and Republicans love electing people they've seen on TV. Just win, baby.
So for the most part, I agree with you when you said that both parties had really bad people that represented them. Trump, however, was a good representation of the Republican Party, because his policies were for the people and not for his own benefits.
Belief is a powerful thing, yeah? Don't need facts. Don't need numbers. You just need focus. You just need a great man in whom you can rely. No politician will save us. No politician has our best interests at heart. They have forgotten that they are there to serve us and instead decided that it's exactly the other way around. And while you claim to agree with me on this, you also seem hyper-focused on this great savior that is Donald Trump, a man to whom you give undeserved credit and erase all blame. But he agrees with you on the culture war stuff, which are the examples you cited in this video. It's been good talking to you, though, and thank you for engaging in the conversation. I hope that you will continue to be curious and continue to question your beliefs as you grow. Because a belief left unquestioned or unscrutinized is not a belief worth hanging on to. Have a good one, comrade.